Hello, everyone. We are back with the final season of FullFunnel Live before the summer pause. And this would be the season of live ABM case studies with ABM practitioners. We have invited our dear clients who are in the trenches and who can share with you what's actually how actually practical ABM looks like. So today we have Priyanna and Megan from marketing team at BenchPrep, and I believe that this episode will be super interesting just because of the fact, not because they are great marketers, not only, but just because of the audience they are selling to, the associations, right? A rare case for everybody, not the audience that is hanging out actively on social media, not the audience that is super responsive to sales outreach. So today we are going to discuss a couple of things, what you can expect, first of all, from ABM, especially from the pilot programs, right? The key playbooks and what you might consider as kind of working playbooks and the things that definitely don't work. So something that any internal team can incorporate. The main mistakes B2B teams make when trying to launch an ABM program. And lastly, most popular question, how to get buy-in from sales and from leadership. We are co-hosting this again with my dear co-founder, Vlad, broadcasting from sunny and hot Spain. Let us know, guys, in the chat where you all joining us from. Type in the chat, curious to see, type your city, country, curious to see where you guys all coming from. And while you guys are typing, I would like to ask you, Brian and Megan, if you introduce BenchPrep and your target audience.
Absolutely. Thanks for having us. My name is Brianna. I'm the head of marketing here at BenchPrep. I've been with BenchPrep for about 7 years now, and I'm tuning in from finally sunny Chicago in the United States. And BenchPrep is a B2B SaaS organization in the education space. We offer a learning management system designed to help professional membership associations or credentialing bodies deliver engaging and impactful learning programs. So whether that be exam preparation for learners looking to obtain some sort of professional certification or maybe a license, or continuing education programs to continuously support those learners. That's our primary product, is our LMS. And while we aren't really focused on any particular industry, we have seen great success in healthcare, finance, and technology. You can imagine that certifications and licenses in those industries specifically require a lot of preparation and a lot of CE to maintain those. So we see great success there. And I'll pass it over to Megan to introduce herself as well.
Hello, everyone, and thank you for having us on. We're so excited to talk more about our ABM challenge and strategies and how our successes that have come along. So I'm Megan Barney, and I am been on the BenchPrep team for about 15 months. And I am also based in Chicago, where we are also headquartered as well.
All right, so nice to meet you finally face to face, Brianna. We had the chance to meet during our summit, which was a great session, and I'm really looking forward diving more into the program, which we didn't get so much chance to break down. And just to kick things off, I'm wondering, what made you shift towards ABM? What was happening that made that a priority at BenchPrep?
Yeah, so I think like many people out there, or at least based on what I see on LinkedIn quite frequently, is that we have seen a significant slowdown with our outbound motion. And Andre mentioned this, but again, working in the space that we work in, sales cycles are very long. And so that contributes to some challenges as well, but we just haven't really seen the type of engagement that we maybe used to see with our outbound motion, and have been also struggling to get larger deals in our pipeline. So the marketing team contributes about 80% of our pipeline, which I know is pretty high, but a lot of those deals, because they're inbound, tend to be on the smaller side. Our larger deals have always historically come from that outbound motion, referrals, whether that be customer or CEO or whoever it might be. But we've seen just a little bit of slowdown there. And so that's where ABM came into play. I had been following FullFunnel and Andre for a long time and had seen some other organizations see success with ABM. We had also run like some I'll call them mini ABM campaigns, not at all to the degree of which this campaign was run, but we did see a lot of engagement the more personalized our touch points were. So it was a strategy that I knew we had to invest in and prioritize. Who didn't know if it would work or not to solve these problems, but those were kind of the catalysts for us looking into ABM. Megan, I don't know if you have anything to add there.
I think just kind of being content support. I know Brianna was a huge advocate for ABM, and I had previously had a little bit of experience in ABM, and I will say I was kind of in awe, shock when I came in and really understood the ABM approach that FullFunnel was talking about and how successful it was. And I think this shift was really exciting, but also a challenge for our whole team with lots of learning curves, which I know we're going to get into too.
Thank you. Thank you. I think the main question that everybody has is, was the transition successful? And just maybe to set up the expectations, would you mind to share the quantitative and qualitative outcomes of ABM, of implementing ABM? Because it's not, we can always talk about pipeline, revenue, etc. But aside from this, at least from my subjective point of view, ABM helps to improve lots of go-to-market operations, right? So I would love to ask you about how successful was the transition and what are the qualitative and quantitative outcomes the teams can expect based on your experience.
Yeah, I think the transition was successful. I think we again had a lot of key learnings and just a new muscle to flex in this regard. But I think overall it was successful from a quantitative perspective. I think we ended up having about 60 accounts in the campaign. I know that kind of dwindled or fluctuated at times, but about 60 accounts. And our goal was to move accounts from being, vendor unaware to vendor aware or having a need. And so we would tag different accounts accordingly. And I think we successfully moved about 40% of our accounts from being totally vendor unaware to vendor aware, meaning they had some sort of engagement with us, maybe they MQL'd or something like that. And then about 12% of accounts moved from that stage to what we called active focus, which was where there was an expressed intent or some sort of expressed buying need. So from that perspective, I think we were successful. And we have also seen 3 opportunities. And although the campaign has kind of wound down, we're still seeing inbound demo requests from ABM accounts. And so it kind of, it is a long play. So something for folks to keep in mind. You're not going to see necessarily results right away. But we're still seeing results from, the 3-month-long campaign that we ran, which is great. And then from a qualitative perspective, I think we've gotten a lot sharper on our content and personalization. I think through this approach, we learned that a personalization is more than just using, somebody's company name or their industry or, some sort of personalized token. It's really, being intentional about the accounts that you're working and understanding everything there is to know about them. And then doing a one-to-one approach, which I think for us was the most successful approach. In the past, again, we've kind of done like one-to-few or one-to-many, which I guess you could argue is maybe demand generation at that point, but we've seen the most success with the one-to-one approach.
Thank you.
I think it goes also to say, it goes to kind of your credit as a team, because we are only a consulting partner. We work with a lot of different teams, and really where you make it or break it is with the execution, and you guys did amazing. I'm sorry, I think I interrupted you, Megan, because I actually wanted to ask you a follow-up to something you said previously, but please, did you want to share something else?
I would love to add kind of one quantitative thing that happened. So we focused a lot on content collaborations. Our sales rep was adamantly trying to get feedback and advice from our target contacts at target accounts. And just kind of one result we had was in February, we had just a conversation. We asked for feedback. And 3 short months later, we had them request a demo. So we weren't asking much of them. We were almost flattering them in a way where we wanted their expertise and to use that. And just 3 short months later, a demo came in. So I think that's great to say, kind of, not only did we increase brand awareness and visibility with that relevant content, but also we saw a quantitative result too.
Yeah, I think one of the biggest insights that people have when starting ABM with content is how much that content is actually geared towards the sales interactions, how much it's actually meant to support sales as they are creating engagement opportunities, etc. Just wanted to reflect on something that you said, but we didn't really. You mentioned something like, okay, I had previous experience with ABM, and then I was surprised when I came here. Megan, I believe you said something like that. And so before we jump into the exact kind of program and how you ran it and diving into those details, from your perspective, seeing different kinds of implementations of ABM, maybe in the past and now, how do you feel about what are the main differences that maybe make one program succeed like this one versus maybe some other flavors of ABM that you have seen elsewhere?
Well, how long is this podcast? Because we can go on all day. The one thing that really stood out to me just in my past, as I did it for a short-lived time, was not getting sales buy-in. So I was doing a lot of direct mail sends and creative approaches, but it was really marketing led without that sales support. So I would meet with sales to kind of get what target accounts we wanted to, but then they kind of stood back and it was very siloed. So with this kind of with FullFunnel, we got the realization where you need sales buy-in early and you need them all on board and everyone invested. So that was a big change. And I think that really helped with the success of this. And of course, it was sales led, marketing supported. Brianna has said this in the past, it's account-based marketing, but where does sales fall in that name of account-based marketing? And I think that's really stuck with me.
Thank you. I think what we can cover next is the playbooks or the orchestration of ABM program. We don't need to dive into too much detail, but I think what would be good also to share how the program is orchestrated. We mentioned already a couple of things, and I would love you guys to elaborate a little bit on it, right? You mentioned early sales buy-in. I would add that what is also important is to show early wins to sales, even like tiny small wins, right? When they see, and it could be account engagement, account replies, right? Something that helps to kind of facilitate that buy-in. Aside from this, obviously, what becomes kind of evident here is that there should be cross-functional collaboration, right, between teams. So what I would love to ask you next, if you can share the program orchestration and the key activities and who was involved, that would be very interesting.
Yeah, so from who was involved, we had myself as kind of the lead of the program, and then Megan being a mission critical player, helping to create content and working with the SDR on outreach and all of that. So Megan was a huge help. And then we also had our SDR and an AE. It was primarily led by the SDR, so they were the ones reaching out for content collaborations, and we would kind of share content on her profile, and then we would repurpose it, even looping in our CEO and our VP of sales to post content as well. So it was a team of maybe like 4 or 5 people. And then, yeah, I think from some of the key activities that we ran, there were a few that stood out in my mind. Megan, I'm sure you have some thoughts here too, but I think the first thing that we had to prioritize was building our networks because we recognized that this was largely LinkedIn led and we had not prioritized LinkedIn in the past. So we didn't have a network. So even if we would have just started posting content, like there was no one there to receive that content. So we had to start there, building networks on LinkedIn. And then from there, it was, posting on LinkedIn, thought leadership type of content, seeing who was engaging. And then week over week, you would kind of change your tactics based on what you had seen from the previous week. So, if someone from one of your accounts had engaged with a post, maybe you would reach out in a one-to-one message with a personalized content hub. Or maybe you saw someone register for a webinar and you reach out ahead of time asking them for anything they might want us to cover in the webinar and things like that. So it was like these one-to-one touch points where Megan kind of talked about, like, we were seeking out their expertise, which kind of fueled our content as well, which was nice. But it was really all about building relationships. And we weren't just asking for meetings right away with people that we had never talked to before, which, sad to say, was something we've definitely done in the past. But it was really just about building the relationship. And then again, the thought there is being like, once there is a need, we would be top of mind because of all of these wonderful positive touch points that we had created with them throughout the course of the program. So I think that was the one thing that really stood out, was that kind of relationship building.
If you don't mind, I just wanted to reflect on one thing. I remember a funny anecdote that happened during the execution when Jalen, SDR, was reaching out to people for content collaborations, and then one of the target buying committee members replied, "What do you want?" And then there was actually, I want to book a meeting. So
classic.
But that was a lot of fun. But I think also Jalen is not here, unfortunately, today. But I think what she would add as well, that I would love to emphasize on it, that there was a mindset shift for sales, right? That it wasn't like pitch slap and like, "Hey, thanks a lot for accepting. Actually, would you mind to have 15 minutes demo call with me," right? So I think that was a huge difference for sales as well, that they understood that this is especially for the accounts that have no idea who is BenchPrep, right? What this product does, to create an awareness, to create an interest, and basically motivating these people to have that discovery, right? So this was one of the things. Megan, what would you add?
Yeah, there's quite a few activities that I think were key to the success. To add on, we did do a webinar, an ABM webinar, focused super hyper relevant to our target audience. And with the pre and post engagement that our SDR had on LinkedIn, with reaching out, I thought it was really interesting that we decided to create content hubs. And these were really great. So anyone who had engaged with us, whether they'd attended a webinar or content collabs, we would create a content hub for them, personalized to that target account, with personalized messaging and videos and resources that were relevant and helpful for them. And the really great part is we got to share that. We got to see what resources they wanted to, which ones they clicked on, how much of the recording they had. And that was a very good key activity to kind of share where their interest was, if there was interest. And share kind of a personal story with them. I would say that was one key activity. And then I think another one kind of internally was our weekly meetings. So having that weekly meetings with Andre from FullFunnel and Brianna and me and our sales rep, it was a perfect opportunity for us to kind of talk about our wins, celebrate them, also encourage us, because we're seeing the more we do, the more action we're taking, the better results. So we're seeing those wins, we're getting more excited, we're talking about the content for the week, the plan for the week. And I thought that our meeting was crucial to keeping everyone aligned, on board, excited, kind of passionate about what's to come. So I would say that was a key activity and would definitely recommend it going forward.
I'm reflecting on how this is actually different to the way that we usually do marketing, the way that we actually create content and get feedback also on the marketing activities, right? I mean, it's so dynamic, is what I'm hearing from you. For example, you're creating content instead of, let's say, the old way where you maybe do some keyword research and create content for the SEO, and then you have to wait to see whether it ranks, and then you have to wait and see whether it converts into leads, and then you have to wait and see if those leads convert into opportunities, and whether those are actually, like Brianna mentioned at the beginning, the kind of opportunities we want, not just like low revenue potential, where now you're sharing content directly via social, you're getting that feedback right away, you're meeting with sales weekly, you're getting feedback from them, you're seeing them use the content hubs that you mentioned as well, you're seeing which content is actually being used, etc., etc. Just wanted to kind of, that stood out for me, how different that is than the, let's say, the usual way of us in marketing teams seeing actually the impact of what we do. Now, I wanted to ask like a quick question, because I think like a lot of people that might be listening to this later are joining us live right now, realize, okay, like maybe they want to do that. They saw that, you know, like you said, it's so important to involve sales. You were there from content. Brianna was there from, you know, managing the project and the program. Can you maybe reflect on the actual time investment that it took from different team members? What do you feel like is not necessarily a minimum, but what people should be counting on to be able to pull this off? And I think you did a fantastic job. So I just wonder, like, how much time did you spend, maybe on average per week, or any other ways you want to express that?
Yeah, so we definitely have experienced some capacity constraints coming into this year. So it's interesting because we did notice, like Megan mentioned, the weeks where we were able to invest more time, we would see more results. We would see more engagement. And so, like, in hindsight, I feel like we definitely have learned that, and we'll take that into our next program. So I would say, if I reflect back, like, there were some weeks where, you know, we had other priorities and we weren't able to lean into this program quite as much, but again, then we wouldn't see the same results. So if I look back, I feel like 1 hour a day is a good amount of time to spend on ABM each week. So from like our perspective, we are creating content. We're looking at which accounts have maybe shifted from one list to the next list. We're, you know, looking at pipeline. But I think for us, it was the content creation part that really took a lot of time, because again, you're not just writing some generic piece of content for a broad set of accounts, you're very one-to-one. And so that, you know, I don't want to take away, like, that does take some time. And the more personalized and one-to-one you can be, the better results you'll see. So you do need to take the time. So from my perspective, I would say 1 hour a day is a good amount of time to invest. But again, there's going to be weeks where you just can't do that, unfortunately. And you'll have to kind of talk about that in your weekly meetings to let people know, hey, I might be low on capacity this next week, and kind of prioritize accordingly. But definitely curious to hear Megan's thoughts, because she was also in the trenches on the content front.
Absolutely. I wish there was more time in a day, I think, for this. I think blocking time on the calendar was something I learned like later into the campaign, because at first I guess I came in not knowing how much time and commitment was needed. So that was kind of like almost a mistake I had, or just like a false reality. But then when you see how much time you needed for execution, I would say, yeah, 4 to 5 hours a week. That's kind of what I'm going. I don't think I think 1 hour a day would be kind of nice to have, but if you can do like a time block Friday afternoon, that's always great time. It's a little quieter. I think the more effort, once again, you put in, the more you're going to get out of it. So I'm actually going to consider that kind of moving forward. How much time am I spending? And also there might be weeks where you can kind of create more content to prepare for those weeks when you have external events or can't do 1 hour a day.
I'd just like to take a quick moment to reflect on what you just shared. I mean, the results that you shared, and then the actual time investment, it's actually quite low. I mean, compared to the time that, to the return that you were getting, knowing that it was a new learning experience, a new program, a lot of things you had to do for the first time, you have to set up a lot of things, and yet you managed to achieve those results. So we hear a lot of times this way of doing ABM, or this way of doing marketing and sales collaboration, where there is a lot of one-on-one, where there is a lot of manual engagement, etc. That's not scalable, that's not scalable. But I wonder, if you look at the time invested versus the result, are there any other activities where you see actually how scalable or how the return that you're getting on those hours? I feel like this should be kind of a nail in the coffin of that argument that this is not scalable, just given this brilliant example that you shared. So I just wanted to thank you for sharing that. But
And I think, if you don't mind, I just wanted to add a few things and also get your take on it, Brianna and Megan. What you mentioned is actually the execution time, right? So you have, and what is great, I feel this is the approach that literally every team should take, this weekly planning and review meetings, and then you do the planning for the next week, considering all the new insights you have collected about the target accounts. You prioritize the content plan, you prioritize the next steps and touch points and how marketing can support sales, right, in account development playbooks. For sales, the same. It's again, ABM in sales. It's not the replacement of the prospecting, right? It's just a new, and maybe I could be a little bit biased here, but I would say it's a little bit better way to do the prospecting, right, in a value-added way. But again, the bare minimum would be 1 hour for the execution. That being said, what is essential, and I feel, I mean, we did this program together. Quite often, the teams that, for example, especially without a robust ABM background or without prior experience of running ABM successfully, right? I feel that they often underestimate the amount of time and the learning curve to understand how ABM works, right? Because in a nutshell, tons of companies think about ABM in one-to-many way, right? So like, okay, let's build this list of accounts based on our kind of generic broad ICP definition. And then because these are accounts, right? And we have approved these accounts with sales. Doesn't matter if there is any product need evidence, do they know us? And it's now a marketing problem, right? The accounts were selected. So what marketing is supposed to do is just run some ads, and sales are supposed to do the outreach, which in a nutshell, again, maybe you can call it account-based marketing because still there are accounts, right? But from my point, it's no different from the standard lead generation, right? It's just the new wrapping of it. So if, let's say, with the hindsight, what would you say should be the time that the team that doesn't have, let's say, experience of running proven ABM programs, what is the time that they should allocate to understand how it works and to plan it and orchestrate it properly?
It's a good question, because you're right. There was definitely time taken in the learning curve from just the fact that we hadn't run a program like this. And so it definitely does take time. And once you have kind of, gone through a program throughout so many months, and you've kind of learned what works, what doesn't, and it does, I feel like, get a little easier. But the initial time, yeah, it did take us some time, even as we prepare for our next campaign, which we're launching later this week. I mean, something that I think Megan and I both talked about as a key learning from the first campaign is, depending on like the accounts or maybe the use case that you are going to focus on. I mean, for the ones that we're choosing for our next campaign, we actually don't have a lot of existing content. It's a new use case for us. So the time that we're taking up front before we actually launch is actually more than the time that we took for our pilot campaign with FullFunnel, which was catered towards an audience, towards our core audience with our core use case that we have all of our content previously was dedicated towards. So from that perspective, it didn't take as much lift on the front end to like get things ready to go for launch, but it did take time from a learning perspective just to understand the new tactics that Andre was showing us, or the amount it took just to even choose the accounts. It's not just, throw a few filters on a Salesforce report and there's your accounts. Like, you've got to do some deep understanding of engagement and MQL, and do your contacts even work there? I know we had some like database cleanup that needed to happen, and some accounts we didn't have any viable contacts for. So all of that takes time up front. And again, as you go through it, you'll kind of learn the best approaches. And once you've done it once, you'll get a lot better at it. But I think something to also consider is, depending on who you're targeting in your campaign, like, do you have existing content, or do you maybe want to take some time before launch to build that repertoire up a little bit, so that way you're not spending so much of your time while the campaign is live doing all of that as you go. So I think there's a couple of different considerations for in regards to like preparing for the campaign, and then again the time that it takes just to kind of learn how to do some things that like you've never done before.
I think oh, go ahead.
No, go ahead, please.
One thing in the beginning that really helped, and it was a bigger time commitment, was the workshops we had with FullFunnel and sales and marketing all on board, talking through kind of what is it from the ground up, doing live content brainstorms, working to do account research live, to all do it together, to really understand the time that it takes to do it and the thoroughness that is required, researching target counts, writing content live. I think all of that we did together in the beginning. It was more time and everyone was on board, but it kind of showed the commitment, and it helped us learn what's important and the key activities that we need to do to be successful. So those are really helpful.
Love it. Thank you. I think this is the biggest problem, even for teams. I mean, like zooming out from our collaboration, lots of teams that consider ABM, they have kind of some false perception of what it is, right? And especially in many teams, sales just think that it's fully owned marketing activity and they need just to show up for the discoveries, right? But all this wish dream enterprise accounts, which in reality is absolutely not true. I think the biggest mistake that lots of teams are making is actually not mapping out the program together and then executing each part of this program together to see realistically how much time it takes, and based on it set up the proper expectations, right? Because how that looks like, as we spoke, hey, let's do ABM, fine, give us your list of accounts. Okay, so 100 of accounts, maybe like 5 buying committee members per account. Actually seems to be a lot. I don't have time, so let me just ask ChatGPT to pretend as my target buyer persona, create tons of different posts, right? Transfer this post to sales look at this crap and say, hey, I will never go into post this, right? So I will better do my like standard outreach, and that's it. This is a nutshell how the ABM looks like for the majority of companies, unfortunately. So I think this was really important, and thank you for highlighting this.
I think,
and I know
something that
I
wanted to reflect on is you said that you need to take the time to prepare that content. You need to take the time to prepare. And I think it's also important when it comes to collaborating with sales, right? We know that, I don't want to say that sales is impatient. I think they are right. They have right to be impatient. Their commissions depend on their results. I mean, it's just a different type of work than we have to do in marketing. And but it is a fact. I mean, it is a fact that we have to live with. We have to respect that reality. And I think what we noticed a lot of times when teams are prepared, like you were, okay, in this case, you already had some content, we could start. I think the biggest difference is once you start with sales, doing these activities, actually having the content and anything that you need to have, having the accounts, having the content, having the playbooks ready. So once they start engaging, they're actually going to see some traction as soon as possible. And that's going to help create that momentum that you really need to get sales along, because at the end, what they will trust results. They will trust, when they're able to book more calls, close more deals, then they're going to trust marketing. And that's just the way of life. But given your kind of hindsight, I wonder, like, if you had to do it again or you had to do it in a different company, how would you go about getting the buy-in from leadership and sales?
Yeah, that's a good question. And I know it's something that a lot of folks struggle with. I think for us, I mean, again, we were already seeing the lag in pipeline. We were already seeing the lag in large deals. So like we knew that there was a problem that needed to be solved. And so that, I think, kind of opened the door to, okay, so what are some possible solutions? And through that kind of conversation, it was where I planted the ABM seed, and we would talk about it. But there was, I think, still a lot of like education to do. Megan touched on this earlier. I don't think the name ABM necessarily helps, but there was definitely a misconception around like what that means. And even candidly, with our like previous little mini ABM campaigns, they were all marketing led. So like they had kind of understood ABM to be this thing, but those were just, you know, trying to get something off the ground, and they weren't successful, and we know exactly why. So I think there was some education that needed to happen in terms of what is ABM, you know, sharing case studies or talking with other peers who have been successful in ABM and sharing those results. But I think for us, because the problem was so clear and we knew we needed to solve it, I think there was definitely more openness around trying the strategy. And so it did take some time up front to get everyone on board with exactly what it would look like. And so I think if you can identify the specific problem that you're trying to solve with this strategy, I think that will go a long way. If you can start with data, so showing any sort of like quantitative metrics or, you know, low conversion rates, or, you know, you were getting a lot of unqualified leads or whatever it might be to kind of make your business case stronger, is a really good place to start. And then obviously, yeah, if you can showcase any kind of success stories to where it's more tangible, I think that was also really helpful.
Perhaps sharing this podcast with leadership and saying, hey, BenchPrep did it. We could too.
Yeah, wow. Absolutely. I'm just wondering if, again, if you together reflect on the pilot program, what would you tell the teams that consider to deploy ABM? What would you kind of, what mistakes you would aware them of they should avoid? So what are kind of the typical things that you now with hindsight know?
Megan looks eager to share some mistakes. I'll let her start.
The first thing that comes to my mind is not committing enough time and energy into executing it, to creating the content, to making your plan and sticking with the plan. I think we were guilty of this. We would make a plan for the next week, and because of other bandwidth issues and kind of limits to timing, we didn't always achieve that goal for the next week. So I think something like a lesson learned would be blocking off the calendar, making sure that this is a priority, perhaps saying no to other things or deprioritizing other things that you are managing. So committing the time and energy and making sure everyone is 100% bought into it.
Yeah. And I think another thing that comes to mind goes back to the like the personalization aspect of it. I mean, it does go a long way. So, I mean, you can cut corners, to Megan's point, if you are, you know, tight on time. Like there are ways to cut corners, and not to say that we never did that, but like that's not going to show you the results that you hope to see. So, from a personalization standpoint, I think that was really impactful for us. So our SDR Jalen would, you know, take the time to do in-depth account research. When a contact would engage with us, she would do research about that contact. And then we were all working together around like what's our strategy? We see this engagement, like what are we going to do about it? We want to reach out for a content collaboration, or we saw this person attended our webinar, create that content hub, or we want to ask them for a quote that we're going to share on LinkedIn. Which a lot of people really enjoyed. People were very excited when we would reach out asking for them to share thoughts about, you know, a question, and we're going to post it on LinkedIn. And I don't know, it was like a form of flattery, I think. But I think that personalized content and those one-to-one touch points really went a long way in making people feel like they can trust you and that you have good intentions. And it's not just, yeah, what do you want? Another sales outreach. You want another meeting or whatever it is. But I think then seeing that, like, that's really not what we're reaching out for. We really are trying to build network and help you solve a challenge, I think was a really important part of our strategy as well. So again, making the mistake of not cutting corners and taking the time to personalize and do one-to-one instead of one-to-many is, I think, going to show you the best results.
And I think there were a couple of other cool things that could be especially relevant for the smaller teams. Like in your case, your CEO was following up with the active focus accounts and not just pitching them, hey, you attended the webinar, have a discovery call with us, right? But suggesting consultations, suggesting audits of their existing processes, kind of to just to be helpful, to give them an idea of like what could be improved in their jobs to be done, right? Which is a natural transition to the discovery, right? Because you discuss and then you can show some best practices on how these things could be improved. Because what we often see is that the buyers, they quite often can't connect the dots between your solution and their problem, right? It's always like in, when we have the discovery calls, companies come and say, hey, but you actually had an experience of selling to this type of audience. Yeah, maybe we don't have that experience, but it doesn't change the fact that we have experience of selling to the global ICP, right, of companies with long sales cycles, high ACV, and it doesn't really matter, but everybody wants to see this. So from that perspective, it helps a lot from the personalization point of view, right? Connect the dots for the prospect. And different buying committee members, like in your case, you have a completely different roles: technical buyer, right? Economical buyer, engagement buyer, the person who is in charge of this professional education. They have completely different KPIs, right? And what's important for one person might be completely irrelevant to another buying committee member, right? And it always helps to connect the dots, because if you don't do this, they say, okay, that's a nice product, but it's just yet another, right? And then they think about your category, yet another LMS, yet another vendor, whatever, right? But when they see, wow, that makes perfect sense to me, these guys did the homework, the perception, I feel, that ABM changes is that they truly understand my needs and my business. This is the perfect partner I want to talk to. And the same counts to perception of the sales teams, right? They don't think, oh, this is Jalen, just one more sales rep who wants to take my brain, right, for the 15 minutes call. So they think about, wow, this person is so knowledgeable. This person helps me, right? This person comes up with, like Megan mentioned, personalized content hubs. And maybe, of course, while when we are not yet in the sales process, we don't know all the confidential information, right? But still, based on that desk research and prior engagement, we can come up, like you said, with the resources that are helpful, right? Even in our case, I remember how, maybe you, Brianna, said this once, even just like we have an understanding of how ABM team might look like, but seeing just visually, right, the structure of the team, the responsibilities changes the understanding, right? And this is kind of the universal resource that we're happy to share with everybody, right? But people say, okay, that's helpful, that's helpful, that's helpful. And that creates that impression that this vendor cares about me, right? So I think these are a few things that are important to consider as well. One more question, if you don't mind. You both mentioned this, the planning phase, right? And that, like Megan, you said, for example, that sometimes you need to say no to other things. At the end of our pilot, we did together a planning of how the Q2 program might look like. And I think what is important here is to coordinate the activities, right? Making sure that ABM and your other marketing activities, demand gen, are not going in silos, right? Okay, this is a bunch of things that we have scheduled, and somewhere on the left side of this plan is ABM, right? So I think this is also another mistake teams are making. So they plan it in silos and they don't incorporate it into existing marketing plan, right? Because then you can always combine the things. I would love, because we did it relatively close to today. What's your experience? How would you reflect on it, and how would you what would be your recommendations on integrating ABM into your existing marketing planning?
That's a good question. Yeah, that was something that we definitely didn't do coming into our pilot campaign, and something that we need to keep in mind moving forward. Yeah, we've got a lot of activities on our demand generation side of things. Megan in particular has a ton of webinars that she plans during the year, which is a huge contributor to our pipeline. So it's an important channel to have. But I think a recognition that we had during this program was that we were spreading ourselves too thin. So we weren't giving ourselves appropriate time to promote, and especially on the ABM front where it does take more time because you're doing one-to-one outreach and those types of activities. We didn't give ourselves enough time leading up to the event. And then by the time we would get there, we were already on to the next event. And so I think that was definitely something that we need to realize moving forward is planning our ABM activities in coordination with our demand generation side of things. And so one change that we'll make for our Q2 campaign is making sure that we have plenty of time leading up to the webinar to dedicate to our ABM webinar specifically. And Andre, I liked the suggestion you made, which was you may have other things going on, but we're labeling this ABM webinar as like our strategic priority. We will have maybe another webinar that we're doing, but we're not going to do the one-to-one outreach. And so that's kind of the approach that we're taking. And it'll be interesting to see the results for each one of these webinars. And to Vlad's point earlier, just like the time that we take isn't really that significant when you see the results that we've seen. So I think that'll be really interesting to see this next month. But that's kind of where what we're doing. So we'll, execute our ABM campaign with our ABM webinar, and then we'll try to slow down a little bit on the demand gen side so that we can give appropriate dedication and prioritization to ABM. But Megan, I know you're again kind of leading that. So any thoughts you might have are helpful.
I think for us, it's planning ahead too. We've really taken the time to take the lessons learned from the pilot and think, what does content look like for this next campaign? Giving us enough time to kind of think through the resources we need and planning ahead. So yeah, we do a lot of webinars on the demand gen side, but we're going to start doing some hyper relevant ABM ones. So I think kind of having that nice balance, planning ahead is really going to help us and has been. So we're excited to see the results as we put more focus a little less on the demand gen and more on ABM the next pilot.
So it just means we'll have to plan another follow-up podcast, I think, to hear about the results.
See you next quarter.
Yeah, it would be good to catch up after summer and see the progress. Maybe just to sum it up, I would love to ask the last question. Maybe Vlad, you'll come up with something else. But my last question would be, if you were going to do it from scratch again, what would be the first thing, like let's say the most important thing that you'll do?
Oh, that's a good question. Well, yeah, I guess the two things that come to mind are, again, that account selection and just being really meticulous and particular about the accounts that we're choosing to target. And then the content. And I think something that I want to say about content, which I don't think we've really touched on yet, is the repurposing of content, which was really helpful. And so I think for us, even though, again, as I mentioned, for our upcoming campaign, we kind of need to build our content repertoire. But don't let that slow you down from launching, because you can repurpose your content. So for example, we just mentioned Megan does a ton of amazing webinars throughout the year. So we'll take, webinar content and repurpose that into blogs or, infographics or whatever it might be. And then we can repurpose that as our LinkedIn posts for our ABM campaign. And then even aside from that, we'll have our SDR post on LinkedIn, and then we'll have maybe our VP of sales or our CEO who really has enjoyed being part of this program as well. But we'll have him post the exact same post that the SDR posted, and maybe just wait, 2 or 3 weeks, and then they'll post that same thing. So you don't always have to be coming up with content from scratch. I highly encourage you to use what you already have. And that is where, a tool like a ChatGPT or AI can help you come up with those ideas. I wouldn't though, and Andre, we talked about this in our campaign as well, I wouldn't rely solely on ChatGPT to create your content. it's very easy and obvious to tell which content is created by ChatGPT. You all have probably seen all of the conversation about the M dashes that are happening right now, but you can take that as a tool to use, but then you need to do your tweaking and personalize it and turn it into your own human voice as well. But just wanted to offer that from a content perspective, because I know it can be quite daunting. So encourage everyone to look at your current content, how can you repurpose it, and then again, utilizing other folks on your team to spread that message as well.
Thank you. I see one question coming from Rob. If you could do a totally stripped back version of ABM, what would that look like? We're micro business with one marketing lead and one salesperson.
Yeah, that's a great question. So again, I feel like it's all about building that network and those relationships, and then content is kind of the fuel of the engine. So, I mean, I will say that we also didn't have a lot of channels to work with. I mean, we had a team of 4, but we weren't running, paid ads. We didn't do any direct mail sends in this particular campaign, both of which we could have considered. But again, we're also, running lean from a bandwidth perspective. So we prioritized LinkedIn as our primary channel for execution, with like email follow-ups. And so I think for, a small team, one marketing lead and one salesperson, that's also where those weekly meetings become incredibly important, so that you can align on what your capacity looks like for the next week. But again, I think on the sales side, they can be, creating those connections on LinkedIn and building those relationships. And then on the marketing side, creating that content for them to post. And then every week in your meeting, looking to see who engaged with your post this week. Was it anybody from one of our target accounts? If it is, okay, what activity should we do for that account this next week? So I think just making sure you maintain close communication and just really leaning into the social selling side of things, I think you will see great results. Because that's honestly where we've seen our results come from as well, was primarily LinkedIn.
Yes, I would agree. We were a small team too. We did have a few more people than we had 2 marketing and almost 2 sales, but I think it was really helpful to just constantly be communicating expectations, kind of saying, we're going to set an hour today, we're going to work on this, and just kind of having that kind of clear expectations and clear goals and communicating if things kind of have to shift.
Yeah, I think you mentioned it several times, things like, okay, you can repurpose content that you probably have to do within your marketing role. Make sure that that's the content that anyhow, what you're planning to do, maybe like the webinars that you're doing, Megan or Rob, I don't know what kind of activities you're busy with, but first, can we align that with our strategic? Well, first, have a strategic focus, right? Like you said, how do we select our accounts is so super important. Again, if you have low resources, where you put those resources all starts with which accounts we are targeting, right? Then aligning the planned activities with the needs of those accounts, with then also that collaboration between sales and marketing. Oh, if you're doing a webinar, hey, why not, like you were mentioning, that you leveraged a lot of these marketing activities as sales touch points. So that's another way. If you're not working in silos, if this content is to begin with relevant for, and the marketing activity is relevant for those target accounts that sales is after, then you also get opportunities to then kind of like kill 2 birds with 1 stone, getting that additional engagement, multiple touch points, without always just knocking on the door and say, hey, are you ready to buy now? Are you ready to buy now? And things like that. So I think like a lot of the tips that you shared today and a lot of the ways in which you handle the program should help smaller teams get more bang out of their marketing buck, whatever. I'm struggling with that. I think this is all going to be very helpful. So thank you so much for sharing that. And yeah, great results. We really have to do a follow-up after the summer.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much for coming and sharing your experience and being fully transparent and frank about what it takes to run a successful ABM program and what challenges and hurdles the team can face, because I feel that indeed the sad reality is that lots of teams, they simply don't understand the motion, don't understand how to run it properly, the commitment and the cross-functional collaboration it requires, and then the program fails. And on contrary, even with a lean team, without having like big resources, you can drive fantastic results, right? And especially if you have high ACV product, you have long sales cycles, that could be your central motion. That's also should be easy, maybe not easily, but again, that should be integrated into your marketing mix, right? And be a part of your marketing strategy. Thank you so much. It was fantastic conversation, and looking forward to other chats.
Yeah, thank you so much for all of your support and help throughout the pilot program. We really enjoyed working with you and are excited to see continued results. So appreciate you all having us here.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ming. Thank you, Brianna.
Good. Thanks everybody
All right,
for
thanks.
coming. See you in the next week. Cheers. Take care.
Bye.